Welcome to episode 2 of the ICB Vodcast series on Dharma in Multicultural Society. In this series, we bring Buddhist and non-Buddhist leaders of different sectors to dialogue on issues of common concern and how religious values play a part in inspiring and motivating them in their work for the good of society. The Vodcast therefore hopes to first understand life's outlook, concerns and strategies in dealing with matters pertinent to the development of a multi-religious and multicultural society. Second, to forge friendship and network between Buddhist and non-Buddhist leaders of society. And third, to promote and inspire values that are shared across a multiplicity of religious traditions and those without any professed religious affiliation. My name is Imran, and I'm the host for today's discussion. With us today, we have three leaders in the social sectors to talk about Chinese Buddhism and its multi-religious expressions. Mr. Phang Hong is President of Buddhist Fellowship Singapore and has served in its EXCO since 2015. Buddhist Fellowship's vision is to build a fellowship of strong Dharma practitioners through Dharma education and community service. In his day job, Phang Hong has been working in both the financial sector's risk management field, including service as a chief risk officer and as a financial sector regulator throughout his career. He is presently the senior director at Toronto Centre, a non-profit focused on capacity building for financial sector supervisory authorities around the world. So welcome on board, Mr. Lip.
Thank you, Brian.
Our second panelist today is Ms. Joyce Lai, and she has served as the founder and honorary executive president for Kampong Senang Charity and Education Foundation for the last 23 years. She's also the founder and former chairperson of social enterprise Eco Harmony Global Network Limited. Previously, she worked with HSBC Bank Capital Asia Limited as a general manager. She's also a long-time volunteer commissioner of Buddhist Tzu Chi Compassion Relief Foundation, founded by Master Cheng Yen in Taiwan. In 2020, she received the Outstanding Women in Buddhism Award by the United Nations Meditation Center. So welcome, Ms. Joyce. Last but not least is Dr. Victor Gan, who is a founding board member of Center for Interfaith Understanding Singapore. He recently graduated with a Master of Arts in Religion, concentrating in liturgical studies from Yale Divinity School and a certificate in Anglican Studies from its Episcopalian Seminary in Berkeley Divinity School in the US. His subsequent training in interfaith hospital chaplaincy in California helps complement his current work as a general practitioner in private practice. So thank you to be on board, Dr. Victor. Yeah. All right, so let's get to our first question for Phang Hong. What are the central teachings of Chinese Buddhism, and what aspects of the teachings speak to you as a Buddhist? And how do these teachings manifest in society and lives of people, particularly within the multicultural context of Singapore?
Thank you very much, Imran, and thank you for inviting me here to join this panel to discuss on this. I think from the context of Chinese Buddhism itself is provided a very strong morality base towards the society in Singapore, and essentially to manifest its pyramids or perfections in their lives. In the Buddhist Fellowship, we follow the original teachings of the Buddha, or what they call Theravada Buddhism. We try to study the source of what the Buddha has said, and we try to aspire to the idealized version of the perfect human being, enlightenment. The ancient scriptures originated in the northern regions of India, and is today known as the Pali Canon, written in the Pali language, and this reflects the Buddha's mindfulness and wisdom. A central teaching of Buddhist learning is the Noble Eightfold Path, and this is a way of a path that Buddha has provided to guide in the way that we conduct our lives. Now, what is this Noble Eightfold Path? So we start off with right views, the way you originate an action, how do you look at certain way of doing it, that's important. Right intention, whether the intention is going to be a good or a bad intention, that is also something that would affect whatever that we do. Right speech, the way you talk, the way you send a message across, does affect the perception that one gets from whatever you are trying to say. And of course, you have the right conduct or right action, how you do, how you act, and that also in a way helps to show where the person is actually coming from and how it actually affects the way they're doing. And then we have the right livelihood, where we talk about living in the right way. I think someone like Joyce here would be very clearly living in a way which actually represents the core tenet of Buddhism, respect for, make sure that there's no killing and things like that. So I think I will let Joyce mention about that part later, but I thought I would mention that because it's something that actually encapsulates what we talk about livelihood. Easy to explain that from that angle. And it also means that on the other side, you would not basically do things like trade in anything that affects death, for example, so arms, munitions, things like that. So these are one way of if you like, working out what right livelihood means. And then right effort, right mindfulness, and concentration are really what actually helps the Buddhists to focus on how to go about living their life. So this Noble Eightfold Path is a very, very core teaching that flows across all traditions of Buddhism. And these 8 paths or practices will actually help to live harmoniously in multicultural Singapore. Let me explain. The Noble Eightfold Path essentially brings out the goodness, the wisdom, and the compassion in people. These teachings are universal and applies to all sentient beings. And they, no matter what race, what religion, what creed, what gender. And so therefore you could say that wisdom is common to all humankind. Compassion and giving are the perfections that we strive for as Buddhists. And so along that thought, we at Buddhist Fellowship will try to work on community service. For example, we work with Ren Shi, as well as the Geylang East Home for the Aged, where we help them to bring some joy to the residents that are living there. And we do this across many ways. So for example, we actually just arranged for a Christmas party with them, virtual of course. But we will then zoom in the activity from our center. But the idea is to bring Christmas joy and the New Year for them. And we believe this is something that just makes them happier. That's it really. So we know that we are not doing much more, but is to just show that we have some others that are actually thinking of them and trying to help them. So what we also do in other areas, for example, during Chinese New Year, we'll do the same thing. So it's really more across all the, if you like, the major holidays, and just to make them feel that this is something that they're included in celebration. We have also organized interfaith dialogues and have invited speakers from all traditions of Buddhism as well as other religions in Singapore to speak at our center. Just recently, we had a talk by a Muslim expert on terrorism, who is a fellow in Singapore, and he spoke about the issues that we face, and we thought this is something that would help to inform our members and whoever else that listen in when we post it onto the YouTube and the internet. We also have speakers from some of the Catholic faith who talked about what are important, what are the commonalities. So I think one of the key things we want to highlight was the commonalities between faiths. And all these efforts are similarly done by other Buddhist organizations, and I dare say other religious organizations, to help to build this cohesion in Singapore. And the Noble Eightfold Path universal values are really quite core to Buddhist beliefs, but at the same time, we think that this is something that also can apply universally to all in Singapore, to allow us to all live harmoniously in the multicultural environment. So, thank you for that. Yes.
Thank you, Phang Hong. I think that's a very comprehensive take on the basic teachings of Buddhism. And I like the part when you mentioned about the universal aspects of the teaching that actually finds affinity with other traditions too. And many of these values within Buddhism is also appreciated in other faiths too. And being in Singapore, we learn from each other, and we can actually tap on the resources of these various traditions to make Singapore a better place. Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Phang Hong. You mentioned about the right living as one of the eightfold paths. Yeah. And I would like to ask Ms. Joyce, since Phang Hong also mentioned that right living is something that you've been devoting your life to, especially when you founded the Kampong Senang Charity and Education Foundation. Now, as an eco-conscious charity, it aims to serve all people, regardless of cultural or religious backgrounds. So can you tell us more what motivates you to do this? And more specifically, what Buddhist values and teachings that inspire you in caring for people as well as the environment around you?
Okay, yeah. I actually only come across Buddhism during my mid-30s. At that time, I'm already working in banking circle for nearly 20 years. I was in banking for 24 years. And within the 24 years, I have seen 3 financial crises. Okay, so when I come across Buddhism, there were 4 teachings from the enlightened ones that actually strike me, and I want to put it into practice. The first one is impermanent. Because of the financial crisis, I see some of my very rich clients, they lost everything just overnight. And some of them, when they fallen sick, they are only able to occupy a hospital bed, even though they have a very big bungalow house. So that actually alerted me that I should do something that within my inner core, and also make my life more meaningful. So I have the idea of how I want to do it. I want to start to do something that can also show my gratitude back to my parents who brought me up, and also the country who paid for my bursary, and Mother Nature who nurtured us from all angles. So that has motivated me. And the second thing is how I do it. Also, I try to look at what the enlightened one says, because he told us that everyone have an equal spiritual being that is equally pure, equally compassionate. So actually, my understanding from what he says is everyone is a spiritual being. Whether or not we have chosen a religion or we chosen to have no religion, we are still a spiritual being that is experiencing the human life. So how we want to experience this human life? And also, because everyone is a spiritual being, they can have their freedom to choose their path of experiencing their spiritual life or human life. And so we can see that some of our friends, they have 2, 3 religions during this life. But some, since birth to the end, only one religion. But that is a personal choice. So it's to be respected, because we are all equal spiritual beings experiencing human life. So when I set up Kampong Senang, I started on the footing of multicultural, multi-religions, because everyone have the same foundation, a compassionate and pure spiritual being within us, which is what Buddhism believe in, whether it is Indian Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, or Tibetan Buddhism. This is common. Impermanent is also common. So the third things when I set up Kampong Senang, is how I do my case study when I receive people approaching us for help, or we reach out to people to see what is their need. So I based on the enlightened one's teaching on the 4 noble truths. the Eightfold Path is part of the Four Noble Truths as well. So these Four Noble Truths, the first one is to actually know what is their suffering. What are they suffering from? They're suffering from stroke, suffering from cancer, or suffering from COVID-19, whatever it is, this is the suffering. The second Noble Truth is about the cause of suffering. Why we have stroke, why he has cancer, because all these are lifestyle disease. So now then we talk about the third thing is how to cease the suffering, help them to cease the suffering. So our role as a non-medical doctor, we can't do anything to cure them, their symptom. We can't do anything to cure their symptom. But what we can offer is to provide them with options and alternatives they can do to help themselves to reduce the suffering. Then the fourth Noble Truth is about the path towards recovery, leaving the suffering behind. That means you have to, the Buddha tells us that we have to walk the path. How many sutras we read is good, but even better if we know how to walk what is being said in the sutra. So this motivated me that I have to do something and put compassion into action. So compassion is the fourth element that I realized from the Enlightened One's teaching, and I see that this compassion, which is great love without expecting any return, is across all good culture, all good religions, including people who believe in anthroposophy. They don't call themselves a religion. So, but it is a philosophy or a belief, a common spiritual belief of everyone, whether or not they have a religion. So with this belief, we started Kampong Senang. Also with the mission, integrating the mission of caring for people in the community, as well as caring for Mother Earth, because we only have one Earth home. So for the last 23 years, Kampong Senang has been doing one appeal only. This appeal is above, maybe should not use the word above, is beyond just one Singapore appeal or one China appeal or one whatever appeal. It is one Earth home appeal. Yeah, because we are all spiritual beings coming to the earth to experience human life. So we actually have to realize that we are all brothers and sisters, including animals. They also, our brothers and sisters, because they provided the biodiversity, all the plants, everything, animals, they all provide the biodiversity that keep us alive. So with this concept, Kampong Senang integrate care for Mother Nature and care for people as one integrate mission. So when we first started 23 years ago, it was very hard time. Who are you to talk about this very funny thing? If you want to have a senior daycare center, you just do daycare for senior. And why you go and plant organic vegetable for them to eat, for them to consume? When you give pack, why you must give healthy, expensive one to the low-income family? Isn't it just give them rice, give them noodles so they can fill their stomach is enough? Yeah, it is, to me, is not enough, because everyone is equal spiritual being. Whether they are poor, they are rich, or they are sick, they still need the same nourishment. So we cannot say because they are low income, then we give them canned food close to expiry, or we give them, very cheap things just to fill the stomach, because that is not the Enlightened One's teaching. Because we have to give our best under compassion love, great love. Everyone deserves the best if we want to serve them and really help them to get rid of their suffering. Because many of them become low income or poor because they have people at home fallen sick, chronic illness, high medical expenses, cannot go to work, need to have family member to be their caregiver. So because of illness, they become they become poor. Of course, there are other reasons, dysfunction family, people unable to manage their money, unable to manage their relationship, that can also cause themselves into this type of trouble. Then you have different kind of follow the Four Noble Truths, yet different kind of way to lead them to think and able to get themselves out. Because we can only lead the path, but we have to lead them to the best, the better alternative that they can cope, they can get out by themselves, not just to give them things that, it's just give them a fish, they don't know how to fish, okay? Of course, I'm vegetarian, I don't eat fish, I never give fish, but anyway, that is the saying. So everything I follow Four Noble Truths. When I receive a case, I will match it with the Four Noble Truths. And then I request my volunteer from all different culture. And so far for the last 20 over years, I don't have any problem of getting my Christian volunteer, Catholic volunteer, Sai Baba volunteer, anthroposophical volunteer, or even Muslim brothers and sisters to actually follow the Four Noble Truths method of releasing ourselves from the suffering. So I believe in Singapore is such a good environment that we have the knowledge of all culture, all religions. We can do it across the board, boundless love. Yeah, that's why my charity dinner is always called boundless love, because we don't want to set any boundary. We don't even want to label anything that is different. We just want to work on the common spirituality, purity, that we have a compassion spiritual being within us, that we can help each other, support each other sincerely from our heart, not just lip service. So that is my motivation of doing Kampong Senang for 23 years. Very hard journey, because when I started 23 years ago, government has not encouraged us to plant anything. So we have to pay for industrial rate for the water that we plant our organic veggie. We have to work on the soil. The soil is so important for Mother Earth. Everything that we do is at our own cost. So I use all my savings. That time also no government subsidies program like now for so many programs. So I actually use my savings that I earned from Hong Kong Bank Group, from banking, to start the foundation. So no regret, okay? No regret. But I feel that now is much easier because government is talking about it. The whole world, all the world leaders are talking about, climate change, how we can rescue the Mother Earth, rescue ourselves because of the climate change, which is a very big issue. It is not a war, but it is a bigger pandemic if it comes than COVID-19, because when the water level rise, many countries, island countries, including Singapore, or some of the big country, the lower part of the country, all will be affected, all the life will be affected. That's why it's important to integrate the care for the Mother Nature or our One Earth Home into whatever mission or community service that we do. So all our center provide only plant-based food, okay? Mostly organic, because we also want to protect the soil and also ensure there is no killing. Okay, if we plant in such a way that attract a lot of insects to come and eat, we also have to, because of harvest, farmer will start to kill insects. But if we plant it correctly, also in certain part you give it to the insects to eat and certain part for human being to eat, then you don't have that problem. So actually the right thing to do, depending very much on we understand that we are all good spiritual beings within ourselves. We can come up with our best to make our life maybe not longer, but at least wider and more purposeful. Okay, that's what I say.
Wow, thank you so much. That's very inspiring. And I think you are one of Singapore's visionary leaders. 23 years ago, when people are not concentrating much on this issue, ecological issue in particular, and you are at the forefront doing it out of your own belief that it needs to be done.
Thanks to the Buddha's teaching, because it's the enlightened one who actually pointed out all this, and I happened to come across it at my mid-30s. Before that, I was actually studying in Anglican Chinese high school, and before that it was in red swastika.
Of course, one of the things you mentioned, and I like how you try to reframe the conversation also. Sometimes when we think giving our best, it's about us, right? But you are saying that when we give the best, it's giving the best to others. And that's how it manifests in you giving the best to those who are in need. Of course, in some of the volunteer works that I've observed, people often give, like you said, Maggie mee and all those going to be expired food. But is that really helping? And I like the way you reframe the whole issue of giving the best to what we do and also to others. And of course, with COVID-19 now, we've seen so much of the universal teaching of Buddha about suffering coming to light and impermanence. And I think also important to remember of the interconnectedness of everything around the world, and we have one home. So that message comes out very clearly, and thank you for leading the way in that. So we move on to Dr. Victor. Because you have heard what has been spoken, I'm just wondering what aspects of Buddhism, and Chinese Buddhism in particular, to you, speaks to you as a Christian. And do you find resonance with what has been said and within your own faith tradition, whether it's through the symbols in the faith or through the values or the teachings as expressed in both your tradition as well as in Buddhism?
Yes, my own exposure to Chinese Buddhism was actually quite minimal during my childhood. I was brought up as a Christian in Singapore. But my curiosity about religions in general during university led me to read about the philosophy and history of Buddhism. And my appreciation was more towards the vastly different worldview that Buddhism comprised, though at that time it was such a foreign intellectual landscape that I was only able to grasp a little bit around the edges. More significantly, during my college days, I also practiced with a Soto Zen group in London, which put me in touch with the practice of sitting meditation and with the aspects of concentration and insight. So these originated, of course, in Chinese Buddhism, in the Chan tradition. And I anchored to them via the mediation of Japanese Zen and also the Western Zen, which actually, interestingly enough, probably framed it in a context that made it more approachable for me at the time. One of the issues that the practice of meditation helped me to deal with was this concept of desire and wanting to achieve a goal. So how to answer that question? What is the purpose of doing this meditation? What are you trying to achieve? What is the sign of success? Some of these questions are central to identities of many people growing up in Singapore. And in the context of a Chan Buddhist way of thinking about the world and meditation, it helps you to reframe some of these ideas and makes you aware that not all of these questions seem as urgent as they may seem to be. I began to appreciate paying attention to my body and my mind, how thoughts wander, how distractions occur, how not to grasp, how to let go. And there are Christian traditions of prayer and meditation as well, but they're not so focused on disentangling these mental processes. Some of them are to do with chant. I studied, as part of my liturgical studies, traditions of Gregorian chant, and those actually have a lot of similarities with aspects of Buddhist chant, especially Chinese Buddhist chant, the importance of musical repetition of scripture. And in fact, when I went to visit in a pilgrimage to Shanghai and observed the Shanghai Catholics on their pilgrimage to Mary, they actually said their prayers with some of the forms and tunes of Buddhist chants, because that was part of their cultural worldview. So that was one fascinating thing I found, that to combine different things that are important to you into one practice. Yeah, so these are the two strands that kept me interested in exploring Buddhism, the meditation practice, something that I found that not as well defined in the Christian tradition, and this analysis of mental processes, this is elaborated in the Abhidharmic tradition, for example, in Theravada. At least that was my initial introduction, but also even more in some of the Chinese texts by the Tiantai tradition, the writings of Zhi and so on. But the other strand that I mentioned was the philosophical basis and the analysis of Buddhism that always asks questions about the world right to the end. This sort of posture of radical doubt that the Buddha himself encouraged in his disciples. So some of these approaches were elaborated, although they started in India, I guess they were given more depth in Chinese Buddhism, and like as I mentioned, the Tiantai and Huayan philosophies. They talk about the interconnectedness of all things. I think that's one important theme that will come up again. And some of these metaphors, like the Huayan metaphor of Indra's net and how all things are connected, has many parallels with some aspects of Christian theology. For example, in process theology, that emphasizes how the dynamic interconnectedness of everything of all phenomenal activities. Yeah, and a related area of Chinese Buddhist thought that I'm beginning to explore is Buddha nature, or Tathagatagarbha. So that's how every being has, I think, as was mentioned, a spiritual nature. There's many parallels in Christian theology, actually. The logic of incarnation of Jesus, or as God as man, was elaborated in early Christian theology by the concept of seeds of the divine, or logoi, being present in all of us, in all human beings. In both Buddhist and Christian traditions, these concepts were also subject to some debate around how exactly to understand them. These are complex issues. And I think I find myself continuing to be interested in these parallels as each helps me to understand the other more deeply, giving me a chance to abstract some of the logical differences from the historical context, and then reattend to the historical context with a better appreciation of the logical differences. In both Christian and Buddhist traditions, the arguments between the different schools were tightly linked with the political ascendancy of different individual leaders and their association with political powers and so on. And in the end, which side happened to win in history sometimes was quite arbitrary. So I think there's so many lessons for us to learn. And to end, maybe I think I would like to consider a viewpoint that I've thought about for some time and recently came across in a strong form by Brooke Zipporah. He's a scholar of Tiantai Buddhism. He says that Chinese Buddhism is uniquely paradigmatic of the cross-fertilizations of two vastly different world systems, that of the Indic or Indo-European thought brought by Buddhism into China, and how it interacted with Chinese thought in the form of Confucianism, Taoism, and so on. And so this cross-fertilization led to people thinking more deeply about the nature of reality and how to live life as a result. In some ways, I think Christianity was also the result of this joining of two different traditions in terms of Semitic thought and Greek or Hellenistic thought. But the dynamic of interreligious encounter in China seemed much less conflictual and antagonistic, with more room to accept the best from each other and build on it rather than tear down what one was opposed to, leading to sectarianism and entrenched dogmatism and all these denominational strife. Hence, we can see from the synthesizing nature of Chinese Buddhist philosophy that tried to harmonize, for example, Madhyamika and Yogacara positions, and even being very flexible about relationships between theory and practice. So between having Chan practice or Pure Land practice and Tiantai doctrine or Huayan doctrine, there was ability to be a little freer, I think, in combining the best of all these traditions. And then to finally end, I think I would like to talk about a more contemporary extension of this approach that has struck me. The rise of humanistic Buddhism in the 20th century in Taiwan and subsequently all over the world seems to be a very admirable response to the reality of our modern world. it has affected me personally, even as a healthcare professional, as I see the work of organizations like Tzu and of course Kampung Senang and so on, internationally in medical care and lay education, not only making a big difference in the social fabric, but also inculcating personal ethical positions in each person, in each encounter, as was discussed earlier. Some religious studies scholars have suggested that this trend may have itself been inspired by some of the charitable work of Christian missionaries. And even so, I would hold it forward as a virtuous example of taking the best from other traditions and expanding on it and becoming and doing even more with it. The virtue of universal compassion, or metta, for me, is one of the outstanding aspects of Buddhist social thought. I see it serving as to balance a more Confucian emphasis on identity and relationships and being bounded by family, clan, and nation, and so on. This universal compassion even encompasses sentient, non-sentient beings through the practices of vegetarianism, meditation, and so on. These messages are also present in the Christian tradition, but not quite explicitly in the same ways. And sometimes they are masked by other competing ideas, some religious and some just cultural, that have interfered with the expression of what we call agape, or universal love, in the Christian tradition, and of our interconnectedness with nature as part of God's creation on earth.
Thank you, Dr. Victor. I must confess that my first encounter with Chinese Buddhism was when I was in primary school, and my friend, my classmate, was praying to Kuan Yin to pass his exam. But that made me realize that the feminine side of the divine is very real in everyday lives. We think of our mother as a figure that shelters us and radiates love, and that was quite central in the idea of Kuan Yin. And I was struck also, of course, in the monotheistic tradition, in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, there was that figure of Mary. And perhaps a similar aspect has developed in the Christian tradition that might relate the idea of Mary and Kuan Yin. Is that something that you want to comment a little bit more?
I think there are some parallels. Both embody this notion of maternal compassion, and it's a very important devotional figure to many people in both traditions. I mean, there are signs of how people understand the similarities. For example, in Chinese artwork and statuary, sometimes there's been a bit of overlap or mutual influence between depictions of Kuan Yin and Mary.
Yeah. Because sometimes we think of the divine as a father figure, and in Asian tradition especially, it appears as a very strong character and can be quite scary at times, right? Very patriarchal and disciplinarian. So I find that a very interesting element within Chinese Buddhism, the feminine side of the divine. And of course, it's also important because that's how we view nature also. I mean, you use the term Mother Earth. Again, the term Mother Earth is something that radiates, love and protection and growth of us as being part of this, born out of the womb of Mother Earth itself. Yeah, so that's something that you want to perhaps explain a little bit more about this idea that is quite central in Chinese Buddhism.
I think in terms of that belief, it's probably in terms of Kuan Yin and all the other figures, if you like, in Chinese Buddhism, it's really what they represent. It's also about how they teach us about loving kindness, about how we should look at others in a more compassionate way. I think that is really the more the core teachings, if you like, of Buddhism, as well as as Victor mentioned, as well as the Christian faith, as well as Muslim faith as well. So I think that is the one area that I would say that we can draw a lot of comfort from. That is more common to all of us. So there are more commonalities than there are differences. I think that's the core point that we come from. Whichever, it could be the Kuan Yin, it could be the Mary, it could be any other figures that we use, and I think this is what brings out that inner goodness, and that's something which we then try to translate into practice. I think that's the other point which I think, as Joyce mentioned about it, that if we just think it, and it's good for yourself, but if you do not practice it, then I think then you're not doing the right way. You actually, so the end point is always about practicing, and I think that's one thing about the Chinese Buddhism, is that there's a lot of generosity involved in making sure that things are being done, like when you mentioned about the praying to Kuan Yin. I think another manifestation of that is that the donations that go out to good causes, for example, that's a very common feature. There's no problems trying to get that from adherents, if it's known that's for a good cause. And I think this is where it manifests itself. We do what we can in whatever capacity we can. I think that's maybe one way of looking at it.
Thank you so much. It's the loving kindness that is very much needed, especially in our society today, with so much issues and challenges. And of course, in a multicultural society, we truly need loving kindness as a glue that binds all of us together. Yeah. So, thank you to our speakers for shedding light on the values within Buddhism, and also in Chinese Buddhism in more specific details, and all its different manifestations. And I'm sure that these manifestations are deeply appreciated across cultures and traditions, and can be said to be truly a part of our shared universal heritage. So thank you once again, and we hope to see you again sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you.